This is Rocky Snyder. At the tone, leave your name and message and I'll get back to you.
Why you do this? I feel no pain. No. I feel no pain. I feel no pain. No. I feel no pain. I have come up and told you this in other...
Welcome to this episode of the RockFit Files, and as you know, this entire season is really dedicated to anatomy and motion, the flow motion model as created by Gary Ward. And one of my colleagues, fellow student of AIM, is Galina Denzel, and she's with me right now. Galina's in Colorado, and she specializes in, well, helping people with acute and chronic pain as well as trauma. So Galina, welcome.
Thank you, Rocky. It's so good to be here. It's been a few years.
I know, it's so nice to reconnect. It always is. And so when last we met, though, I think you were in Southern California. You made a shift to Colorado. And first of all, how's that been? How is it going from La La Land over to the Rocky Mountain State?
Yeah, well, it's been really wonderful. I've been in the United States 9 years. I'm originally from Bulgaria. And so landing from Eastern Europe into South Orange County was mildly put it, a culture shock. And as somebody who's really connected to nature and who loves being outdoors, I loved the ocean. I loved the beach. Like I love the beach up where you are in Santa Cruz. But you know, it was very urban. It was very concrete. And I feel a lot more at home in Colorado. I know the herbs and I know the plants and I know the trees and my body knows the seasons. So I feel a lot more at home here.
That's great. Now, not many people, I haven't shared this at all, but Santa Cruz is rife with the Bulgarian community here on the Central Coast. In fact, some really cherished dear neighbors that live right across the street from us, Milka and Dechko and their son Ivailo and Grandma Baba, they're from Sofia. And they have kind of adopted us into their life and their family. So we go over for the Orthodox Easter celebrations and we decorate eggs the night before. And they've really just guided us into all these incredible traditions. The kids love it. And of course, the food is amazing. It's not, well, I'll say there's some colorful dishes, but it's a treat to actually cross cultures. So you come from an amazing place with some really beautiful people.
Yeah,
and,
thank you.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. But you took the anatomy and motion courses several years back. I think it was that 2014 or 15 or somewhere around there.
You know, I wish it wasn't 2020 because I could tell you exactly when that was, but 2020 has made time not work in my head.
But before that, you were what other approaches have you accumulated over the years? Let's start there.
Yeah, so I'm probably your first guest who trained in the Bulgarian Academy of Sports.
Nice.
And so my original kind of step into movement was it's a funny story. So I took a year between my third and fourth year of college to work on a boat in the Cayman Islands, out of all places, because I wanted to practice my English. And I really didn't care where I would live as long as I could practice my English. And so I ended up working on this 52-foot boat with a crew of 6 people. And I arrived there probably weighing like 110 pounds. And I could not lift any of the anchors. And I could not do any of the labor. And it was really hard. And so the captain came to me and said, "You need to go to the gym." And I was like, "What? Okay." So I started going to the gym. And I was like 21 years old. And I was a former dancer, runner, like did all the girly stuff, but had never really lifted heavy weights.
That's funny because I think of Bulgarians and I automatically think of Olympic lifters and
Right,
just powerful people all
right.
coming from the Eastern Bloc. And yet you're an aberration in my mind. All right. So you
I
hit the
know.
gym.
So I hit the gym and I fell in love. And I came back, and before I had to start my fourth year at college, and my degrees in English and linguistics, I was like, I need to do something with this love for movement. So I went to the Bulgarian Sports Academy and did quite a bit of training there and got certified as a personal trainer and nutritionist and massage therapist and group exercise instructor, all that stuff. And opened together with a partner at the time, the first personal training studio in our country.
Really?
So I was 24 years old, had no idea what I was doing. Then came to the States, got NSCA certified because I really wanted to sink my teeth into something that was more real. And there started my many, many years of owning a gym, interning the whole time under a physical therapist, traveling to the States to, be with Gray Cook and, come to the NSCA conferences and perform better. And that was my 20s and late 20s all the way into my late 20s. And so I was really dedicated to helping people. And I was like, I'm going to learn anything I can. I'm going to travel wherever I need to travel to learn this. So I've always had this inside of me, which is a little fun when you think of it. But I really wanted to work with special populations. And in our personal training studio, there were, multiple trainers who worked with people who could just come and do stuff. And I was the one who got everyone who couldn't do stuff. So I worked with all the people who were pregnant, all the people post-op, all the post-surgery people, all the people who needed rehab, and beautiful, beautiful PT who supported me through learning all of this. So I really specialized early on as this really highly refined personal trainer who could do really special work. And then when I moved to the States, about a year before I moved to the States, I met online Katie Bowman, who is a fantastic mentor and friend of mine now, about more than 10 years later. And I started doing Katie's online courses. And when I moved here, I got certified with Katie in the restorative exercise program, and then became staff for her and started teaching restorative exercise specialists who were in training, both in Europe and here. And Bulgaria has the highest number of restorative exercise specialists per capita in the world. We have 12 people for 7 million, which
Why is that?
Because of me. Because I'm
because
there.
of you. Because you started it all.
Yeah.
I had no idea what trend-setting kind of person you were. Amazing.
Craziness. And so that's kind of the benefit of being in a small country, because very quickly, as you bring some knowledge in, that can spread, just like AIM through my dear friend Radoslav Arangelo has now, become a thing in Bulgaria, It's beautiful. So it just takes one person in a small country. I mean, it takes one person in a big country, but just happens faster in a small country. And so, when I came to the States and started working with Katie and really understanding the kinds of issues I was interested in, I quickly understood I was not interested in personal training. I was not interested in fitness. I was really interested in helping people suffer less.
Is that because the change you see is just so overwhelmingly, for lack of a better word, powerful? I mean, the fact that you can help, encourage, and change the outcome of somebody, or what?
I've gotten to know myself so much better now. So I'm almost 41. So I've been training people since I was 22. And as you know, you change. You change as you work, and you change as a person. And I have gotten closer and closer to understanding my values and kind of what I'm here for. And really, I've always looked to help people, A, suffer less, B, find out that they're not limited. They're actually unlimited, but there's a limitation, whatever the limitation was, that they are actually unlimited and that they can fully heal. And so I think in personal training, so much of the clients that were coming my way wanted to be fit or to lose weight or to recover, after something. And it seemed like there was such a pressure on how you look, and there was so much pressure on these outcomes that needed to be very tangible. And to me, I was really looking for some sort of a deep soul or spiritual transformation. Now that I'm looking at it, I really wanted people to become more of themselves. And I think I didn't find a way as a personal trainer to do that. I know dear colleagues, beautiful people around me who are doing it as personal trainers because that's their thing, but it wasn't mine. I just couldn't find myself being able to blink all these things that just lit me up as a personal trainer. As a restorative exercise specialist, and I've always loved teaching. I've always been an educator. I went to school to teach. And it allowed me to teach. I wanted to teach people how the body works. And, as a personal trainer, I didn't really get that opportunity. I also wasn't developed enough. I think I was too young to understand how to do it. Mm-hmm. And so I found, working with Katie and starting to understand biomechanics and starting to understand this relationship between our bodies and the environment, that we really are an interaction, and movement is kind of the glue of the interaction between us and the environment. And it really just blew my mind. I also became free from some chronic pain that I had for a long time. So that freed my body up. And I just felt like, wow, you know what? I'm actually a lot healthier, not pushing myself so hard and working on these finer quality movements. And I can do this for my people. So I opened my studio in South Orange County, particularly just doing restorative exercise, biomechanics education, workshops and one-on-one work, and then also including lots of, other modalities like neurokinetic therapy, like restorative breathing, like DNS, FMS and SFMA, the other things that I was trained in that I could really become more and more refined. And I think I was in my level 2 neurokinetic therapy when I found out about AIM. And then it took me years to be able to match my calendar with the time that Gary was here so that I could do the training. But I was just like, I fell in love with the book when it came out. And I was like, this is it. I love feet so much. And I love teaching people about their feet and their bodies so much. And then that's kind of how I came upon AIM. But up until last year, all I did was full days, as you know, how we work in this work when we're serving people, just full days at MoveWell Studio, all week long, working with clients, helping them move, analyzing movement. And it's been a beautiful, beautiful journey getting where I got. And because my population at MoveWell was mostly people with chronic and persistent pain and complex health histories, just because of the people I was serving an upper cervical chiropractor clinic. So I was actually attached to them. They were in suite A and I was in suite B, and I just took care of their patients. And they only got people that no one could help. And I only got the people that they couldn't help. So like by the time it got to me, I was working with very complex situations. And so about 7 years ago, I also added some trauma skills to my work and went through 3 years of training as a somatic experiencing practitioner, 2 as a somatic practice practitioner, which is a touch modality for trauma therapists, whether they're psychotherapists or body therapists. And then another 3 years of the neuroaffective model, which is working with early developmental trauma and those conditions that don't allow our bodies and our psyches and our whole beings to fully develop because of difficult circumstances of growing up or something that didn't quite go well. And so with that, I feel like now I'm finally at 41 at the place I'm like, okay, now I understand why all this searching, because this is where I was trying to get, where I could really support people in moving through suffering, moving through pain, and into higher connection with themselves and with others and with their larger environment. But movement has been a huge, huge part of it. It'll always be a part of my work. And now I see where it fits much better.
Nice. Now, when you say somatics, I'm curious, is this the work based on Thomas Hanna, or is it a different somatics?
That's a very, very good question. So Hanna somatics is a very particular kind of work. Okay. Somatic experiencing is based on the work of Peter Levine. Okay. And it is work that is typically taught to psychotherapists. So I would say about 5% of us who have finished this program are body workers. Most people who finish that program, about 95% are psychotherapists or social workers, people who work in mental health, not necessarily in physical health.
And how does like your education in anatomy and motion, your understanding of the flow motion model combine with the work with somatics? I mean, how does that interact or overlay? How would you describe that?
You know, it's very, very interesting to even ponder that, because it'll probably take days to map it out. But you can think of, when you think of the autonomic nervous system, it is acting on our behalf, and it's acting on our behalf to do a pattern that it perceives as necessary. Oftentimes when we are in pain or when some sort of a chronic condition, like your clients and my clients come to us now on Saturday in October. And they're like, here I am on Saturday in October, but I'm carrying something that is Monday, 1976 in my right shoulder. Right?
That's awesome. I actually have never really considered like putting it in that type of wording. I love that. Okay, and please go on. Sorry.
And so we have this present moment, and in the present moment, you know, you and I whether we're videotaping, you know, a movement analysis, or we're asking about a certain, you know, aspiration that the client might have, they're sitting in front of us in their physical body, and their autonomic nervous system is running software or programs or whatever you want to call it that is for another time. So there's these time capsules in our body, and in somatic experiencing, we have a very particular way of looking at any one thing that's in the body, and we look at it through 5 channels. So we look at sensation connected to a particular occurrence or particular episode or particular situation, or a particular complaint in the body, say that you have elbow pain. So we look at sensation. We look at, are there any images with it in your mind? Any mental image representations? Are there any behaviors around it, such as a movement or lack of movement?
Yeah.
Is there any emotion around it? Right? And what meaning do you have around it? What thoughts, ideas, beliefs do you have around it? So we have all these 5 things. And you can imagine if you have a shoulder injury, that with that, there is some sensation, that there's some emotion, that there's certain mental imagery. For example, you remember how your arm was over your head when you fell off your skis, right? There's some behaviors, maybe there's some guarding, there's some fear avoidance behavior, which we know in pain science is a huge deal. And then there's some ideas about like, oh my God, I'll never golf again. Right?
Sure.
Does that make sense?
So you're basically taking 2 models, the biomechanic and the psychosocial emotional component, the psychological model, and you're just fitting them into one another and how they integrate. So you could be coming from both perspectives, working with the person from a psychological perspective, but also getting their body to move. And it's no wonder that when we use the biomechanical model with flow motion model, gait patterning, however we want to say it, that suddenly we'll have emotional releases. They'll be holding back. They'll be guarding. Yeah, just this completely makes sense to me. Absolutely.
And this is what's really, really important to appreciate and to really hold dear and hold in compassion, is that when your body's doing something, your body is not a moron. Your body is doing something to serve you. And every dysfunction has a function that we don't know about yet. And so I think in the flow motion model, it's so clear to see, there's something here that's moving too much, but it's moving too much because this next thing over there is not moving. Or there should be movement here, but there isn't because there's some fear avoidance. Oh, you can't load this. You can't transfer your weight over here. And when you can't do it in your body, you can't do it in your life. You can't do it in your relationships. You can't do it in your work. You can't do it in your aspirations. In somatic work, we look at these cycles of contraction and expansion all the time. And most people, when they come to us, they come contracted. I want to move over there, but I can't. I want to do this thing, but I can't. And your nervous system cannot do this without your body. Your nervous system cannot have an adaptation to something that happened to you without your body being included in it. Whether it's a way that maybe you were physically violated or scared when you were a child, or it's a way that you fell off a motorcycle. Your body will hold this experience in the nervous system if it hasn't completed its cycle. And a completion means that you have returned to normal function. If it hasn't completed its cycle, so people come to us with incomplete stuff, it will be holding it in your tissues, and movement will be one of the doors that we can enter. We can enter through awareness, we can enter through attention, but typically what's going to happen in kind of a somatic based session, especially if it's shock trauma, is we can enter through sensation or through image or through memory, and then movement will appear. This spontaneous, beautiful, organic movement will appear because the body always wants to do what's right. The moment you get injured, there's the healing plan that starts to happen right side by side. And so that inner physician wants to do its work through movement. And I think the flow motion model is probably the most precise and beautiful way that you can say, this is where it's not moving, and what kind of an invitation can we make that is safe? Because oftentimes the invitations we make to the body are not safe. Like a chiropractic adjustment, as beautiful as it is, by some people might be experienced as not safe. I'm lying down, someone's doing something to me. As opposed to, I'm standing up and I'm doing something myself.
Yeah,
You know?
Brilliant. And I think, wouldn't it be wonderful, wouldn't it be nice if the physical therapy model would somehow resemble this as well? Because right now it's much more pain or symptom based,
Sure.
rather than or when they determine that one of their patients / clients is rehabilitated, is ready to be released, when deep down inside, you and I both know that
Sure.
actually is not the case. They've just reached maybe a tolerance level that will allow them to continue to go through their life with minimal or no pain at that moment, but they are still having the residual effects, whether it's psychological, biomechanical, and we're not there yet. So I'm really curious. You said 5% are movement therapists when it comes to the somatics work that you've been studying. How many of those of the 5% were physical therapists?
You know, I didn't. Do you know Seth Oberst?
I do not.
You might want to look him up. He's a good person to look at in the physical therapy field. Who's
excellent.
He I think has completed by now his somatic experiencing training. You know, I haven't met. Seth is the only PT that's SC trained that I know, but there's tons of them. There aren't tens of thousands of them, but there's significant number of them. And there's many PTs that are understanding the biopsychosocial model now and pain science. And so I think it helps to appreciate how young our field is. The field of movement for health is such a privilege. Because, you know, movement for recovery from surgery is a necessity. Movement for full expression of self and wanting to, you know, prolong your life, your tissues, enjoy yourself. It's a huge privilege. It's an economic privilege. I mean, it's the reason why my country, that is, you know, still very much a developing country after recovering so many years politically, you know, I have 2 PTs I can refer to in the whole country. 2.
Wow.
There's 1 pelvic floor PT in the whole country trained with Diane Lee. 1. She's spectacular, but there's 1. So we're looking at this development that is so new that, of course, we're going to have our growing pains. And I think our clients and us as clients we are a part of the experiment to see, wow, this is really not working. This sucks. Like this is all you're going to offer me. There has to be more. But as you know, healthcare is a lot more about financial documentation than actual care. And so it becomes very complex.
Yeah, it is rather a luxury to start to explore movement in that way.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
my neighbor across the street there, every time you ask him, "Hey, how are you doing today?" And I don't know if it's a cultural response, so you'll have to tell me, but his response is still alive. It's like that's what he says. I'm still alive. And I realized that might have some gravity to it. Like if you're coming from a developing nation where political unrest is a regular thing, to say that you're still alive is a huge accomplishment. Forget about if I have to explore movement just to get me to a point where I am at my utmost best. Maybe just dealing with pain or living in it is okay if your biggest concern is if you're going to be alive tomorrow.
Yep. I will never forget doing an AIM analysis on a woman who was brought to me by one of my clients. She said, I'm going to bring you someone from my church. She's in a lot of she's got sciatic pain and she's miserable and she's a bus driver and she needs to be able to drive. That's her job. Yeah. And I had never worked with a bus driver. I'm in South Orange County, where my clients are, realtors and, people who can afford to come and pay out of pocket because I don't take insurance, and people who are privileged and their kids and their husbands, that's who I took care of. And this lady comes in, sweetest woman ever. I do my video analysis. I slow it down. I write some notes. I do the whole intake. We're here for like 2.5 hours, and we do some very, some like hip shifting, and we do some work around her heel, and I give her some wedges to take home. I tell her I'm going to video her home, send via video her homework. And she's just standing there like staring at me like I'm an apparition, And we just sat and talked in my waiting room after, and she said, I didn't know that anyone like you existed. I had no idea that a person like that existed. Wow. And it's true. There are many people who don't realize that Rocky is there as a support, or Galina is there as a support, or any of our other, wonderful AIM colleagues. And to me, that's privilege in a way. It's like, if she didn't have this friend who came to me another way, she would never know. So how many people we can't reach, and how beautiful that, Gary and many of our colleagues have free content and things that are out there on the internet. So, you can send all these basic 4 videos to anyone who needs them. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. But, we have so much work to do in the world. True.
But the other thing that gets expressed often is when you're working with somebody and you have positive results, they say, no one has ever told me these things before, or no one has ever looked at me the way that you've looked at me. Yeah. And it's a wonderful and sad moment at the same time.
Of course.
And I hope it's more wonderful in the future and less sad, that there's more people out there starting to explore the principles and philosophies and understand how integrated we truly are. And now,
it's beautiful. It's beautiful to consider it as a possibility.
Yeah, you mentioned the assessments. I'm curious because there's so many ways in which we can try to get to the root of things, and so many trails that we can take to get to the center or the focal point we find. And so there's like the poor man's foot scan, there's static posture, dynamic movements, video gait, coach's eye, freeze frame, phases in the cycle, and so on. What kind of approaches have you kind of done over, say, the last few years of working with people like this?
Yeah, I would say I've done it all.
Okay.
And the kinds of clients I was working with hands-on, which now my work is, kind of changed and transitioned online. So I mostly serve people by creating educational material and videos and just hoping that they consume them correctly, and then referring everyone to Margie Verba for the other stuff. And Margie is brilliant.
She is
but
so brilliant.
She's so brilliant. And, my work with trauma has, taken kind of the larger part of my attention, and, I'm still studying, and there's just a lot of things that I'm doing. And so I do not have the ability to dedicate myself to really being the exceptional person that, for example, Margie is in being able to do video analysis. But to the degree to which I've been able to serve my clients, I've really had to use it all, including like hands-on muscle testing and hands-off muscle testing, like using indicator muscles and, for places that you can't reach, just really, and using palpation and using my hands-on skills that I have, and also using a lot of my intuitive skills and my ability to see energetic patterns skills. And I would say everything has come in handy, and I always trusted my gut that when the person comes, I will know what kind of assessment they need. We've all done the 2.5-hour assessment that wasn't better than,
Yes.
And so it's sometimes I think it's, the more I was able to remove myself from trying to impress my client and try to get closer to serving them the most honest way that they needed in that moment, the better I had access to my testing tools and to my assessment skills.
I'm really glad you say that, because I look at the assessments as just tools in the box.
Yeah.
And for some people, I'm going to explore foot mechanics in my hands or on the floor. At other times, people might need to see more of the pressure, the force plate, and actually see a readout on the screen, while other people just are needing to feel their bodies move and where they're restricted. So I might do a dynamic assessment or so on. So it all depends upon the person. There isn't a specific recipe in which I do. I used to try that, but then I realized that this person really needs more awareness and education, and this is not giving them what they need. It's interesting you bring up Margie, by the way, for those listening here to Galina and myself. If this is the first time you're listening to the podcast, go to the previous podcast, just last week's episode, because Margie and I sit down and chat quite a bit, and you'll really enjoy that session. Lovely. Too. Yeah. Now I want to get a little bit not off track, but I want to really talk a little bit more about the other elements that you have been really focused on recently, more to the point with, you've been working with people with chronic persistent pain, trauma, and so on, but you've also been working with people that have eating disorders and body image issues, and just tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So my work around that started with, it's all my work has started through some sort of a personal journey. Like I don't know that I ever teach anything that I wasn't a recipient of first. And it just so happened that in my kind of complex personal trauma history, one of the big symptoms that my body was telling its story was I had body image issues growing up and through adulthood, and also quite a few behaviors around eating that, in the beginning looked more like, dancer eating, which is pretty much not eating, because you don't eat when you're a dancer, especially in the Russian classical school. And then turned more into orthorexic kind of behaviors around where everything was around health. But I never had any freedom around food until my early 30s. And so I spent about 25 years suffering from eating issues and body image issues. And at the time that I started my somatic experiencing training, I had given up on trying to solve it, because I had tried and nothing had worked, and there were no solutions and nothing stuck. And so I had pretty much accepted that, just like my clients live with fibromyalgia or chronic pain, I'll just live with eating issues. and I will try to be as accepting of the weird behaviors and the fear and try to take as better care of myself as I could, but that would stop looking for solutions. And I wasn't, underweight dangerously, or, it was more just rigidity and just controlling many aspects of my life that needed to happen organically. But I had enough space mentally and emotionally where I could tolerate it. And so then about 2 years into my somatic experiencing training, all of those behaviors had gone away. All my food behaviors had gone away. All food fear had gone away. And all my body image issues had gone away. And so I went back and kind of retraced my steps in a very organic way to see what were all the things I did with my therapists, in my training. What did my nervous system, where was it when I started? Where was it when the symptoms were gone? And so over the last 5 years, I've developed this way of working with nervous system regulation, allowing people, teaching people how to move their systems from freeze or fight or flight, whatever they're stuck in, or stuck in both. For a lot of my population, they have, they're dominant in both systems. And then how to start coming more into the present moment and be better connected to themselves and others and the world, and working through, big trauma moments often on the path. But really all the tools are there, and the work is gentle and is beautiful. And so I wrote a book about it last year. So hopefully the book will be ready soon.
Oh, excellent.
I finally found somebody who, it took a long time. I waited very patiently for the right inspiration. So I have someone working on the cover, and beautiful, beautiful photographer who works with trauma and body image herself, and in her photography. So she's going to be the one working on the cover. She's doing the shoots right now in Bali, out of all places. Really beautiful.
I love that.
I know,
Does she
right?
need an assistant?
I know.
I could hold the lighting, whatever.
Whatever is needed, right? And so she's working on the cover. I'm excited about that. And there's just beautiful work has evolved out of it. And movement is a big part of it. Because when I teach my students, I don't only, teach, if you remember, like the 5 things that I told you about, we work in image, we work in sensation, we work in movement, we work in thought. So when it comes time to movement, where the flow motion model so beautifully flows is when I invite people to understand that their feet, their ankles, their lower bodies, their whole bodies actually, the first movement you learn when you're born is yielding. Yielding is the first movement. Like when you hold a baby, your baby allows you to hold them. That's yielding. Yeah. And when you look at somatic movement, we have pushing and pulling, right? But pushing and pulling come after yielding and after rolling, right?
Sure.
And so you just think about the developmental sequencing of how movement is organized, and yielding is the first thing we learn how to do. Well, if you didn't have a safe environment to yield into, what are your feet going to do when you start to move around? They're going to get rigid. Or if your environment is overly intrusive, you're going to collapse. Right? And so you start looking at the foot as like, what is this foot telling me about how this person has lived? Not just their high heels. I mean, that's interesting too. But a lot more interesting is, how did they develop? Do they know how to trust that things hold them? Things from the ground to their running shoe to their partner, are things holding them? And so I have really enjoyed teaching people about their feet and how, they can go, and from, if you look from a nervous system perspective, from a contraction into an expansion, right? Or from a adapter, to a lever, right? From mobile to rigid. And like Chris says, when they ask him about pronation and supination, he says, what's better, the inhale or the exhale? And it's like that in the nervous system. What's better, arousal or deactivation? fight or flight or rest and digest? Like, no, it's a ludicrous question. You need to have access to both.
Yeah.
And
Great.
I find the flow motion model just comes in so beautifully with that, and just teaching the body how to yield and how to be with support, but then also how to activate itself and move away from what it doesn't need to be with. I really encourage my clients to move, to walk, to dance. And I have invited as a collaboration project a spectacular 5 Rhythms choreographer who works with them on dance.
Oh, nice.
And 5 Rhythms is kind of like, if you can think of something as genius as the flow motion model, but in the dance world. It's just spectacular, teaching the body how to do everything it can do and how to move where it doesn't want to move and how to move out of where it's stuck. It's just spectacular. So it's really been a creative project too. Like, how are all these components that I've been working with in supporting people in their health journeys all these lives coming and creating a curriculum? And it's been beautiful to grow it and to teach it and to develop it as I'm teaching it.
That's wonderful. So do you have a working title for your book?
I do. It's called Peace with Self, Peace with Food.
Peace with Self, Peace with Food. And just looking off into the future, do you have an idea of when that could be available?
You know, I chose to self-publish instead of publishing with a publisher. So
Okay.
I'm waiting for the cover to be done. And I'm really hoping that spring of 2021 is probably like maybe March is probably really realistic.
And then if people wanted to, you say you have members in which you've been providing videos and movements. If somebody were to be interested in getting guidance under your tutelage, how would they do that?
Sure. So there's 2 very simple ways. If somebody's really like feeling led to think about the emotional eating piece and the neurobiological work, my website for that is purebelonging.com, really easy. And you can grab one of the chapters of the book on the first page. So it'll kind of give you an idea of what the book is about. And then my husband and I own an online coaching school that I develop all the movement instruction for. That's at EatMoveLive52.com. Super simple.
EatMoveLive52.
Yeah.
And you're not unfamiliar with podcasts, right?
Yeah, we have our own podcast. I'd love to invite you to be a guest on it. I think it'd be so
cool. Well, that was not why I was asking, but I have no problem with chatting up a storm. So I would love to do that. But I want others to know that we're listening to this podcast, how they can listen to more of your lovely voice and all the things you have to share. So what is the name of that podcast?
It's Eat, Move, Live 52, just like our website.
How wonderful is that? All right. And you can find it on all the major podcast platforms.
You can.
iTunes,
And we
Spotify.
mostly do interviews, but we have beautiful guests, and it'll be really, really lovely to have you on soon as well, because you have a book too to talk about.
Yes, I do. We can just try and share and spread the good news, I guess you'd say.
Yeah.
And I love everything that you've shared. Truly, and the fact that this is not just dealing with the pain clients, the chronic or acute persistent pain, but you've really carried over and used the tools of everything that you've learned, of course, including flow motion model, anatomy and motion, to help people in regards to their eating, which is, I think, you're the first guest that we've really delved into that model with. And we've had people, we've been talking about baseball pitching, a golf swing, a whole bunch of different modalities of chiropractic, acupuncture, and so on. But I love the fact that there's so many avenues that this information can flow into to help complete or make more comprehensive to help more people. So that's wonderful.
Absolutely. And I think if you can appreciate any compensatory behavior, whether it's emotional eating or restriction, like extreme dieting or extreme exercising or consuming alcohol or, doing drugs or whatever it is recreationally, if you look at all these coping mechanisms as the body's kind of signal to us that there is dysregulation, that there is dysfunction, then we can go in, and by repairing the way the body organically is supposed to work, by restoring the original flow of life, which trauma is just an interruption of the original flow of life. And you can see how that really beautifully goes with the flow motion model, because there's no exclusion. When things are right, they're right in every modality. Mm. And so the same principle in flow motion model or somatic experiencing or any of the other methods I'm trained in, the same principles are correct because the principles are correct. And so you can see how we can restore the original movement of life to a body, whether it's in trusting the exhale, whether it's in trusting pronation and internal femoral rotation, like, oh my God, my knee's not going to snap if I don't do my step ups with my knee behind the, like I was doing this morning, I was doing some step ups with like my knee, way medial and like a really nice internal rotation. I was really enjoying the load on my vastus medialis. And I was like, oh my God, if I had seen this, 10 years ago, I would have had a fit. If I had seen someone do that, I would be like, you're going to die, and just to experience the ability to go and go and inhabit all ranges, whether it's a range of emotion, it's a range of movement, it's a range of imagination or sensation. I think we can free ourselves up so much. And whether you do it through movement or something else, I don't think it matters in the end. I don't think our soul cares how we do it, as long as we become more of ourselves.
Oh, that's a wonderful, wonderful way of thinking about this. Oh, this has been wonderful itself.
So
I
good.
loved talking to you. I just wish I had reached out sooner and we could have just chatted up a storm offline and unrecorded, because I love everything that you're doing. It's just wonderful. And well, when I come visit some other friends in the Colorado region, which are probably right down the street or around the corner from you, I will make a point of telling you when I'm coming.
Please do. We have 13 breweries in our town, so we'll keep you, and 2 cideries, 2 gin distilleries.
Oh boy.
And if you don't drink, then, because we don't, we drink a lot of non-alcoholic beer.
Yeah,
but we'll keep you company.
No, I reached my quota a long time ago. I figured, why wait until you're 70 or 80 to have your last drink? I just did it all sooner. So, but the ski slopes are nice, and
and the food is great. And the food is great. So we'll
carve up some turns on A Basin or something like that, perhaps.
For sure. For sure.
Okay.
So good to talk to you. Thank you for your generous hosting and your beautiful questions, and flow motion goodness to you.
If you'd like to find out more information about the flow motion model, anatomy and motion courses, or Gary Ward himself, pick up a copy of his book, What the Foot, at findingcenter.co.uk. And while you're at it, pick up a copy of my book, Return to Center, where I take the flow motion model and apply it to strength training and conditioning. You can get a copy of that at rockysnyder.com. Thanks for listening.